I think we can probably get started, eh?
Sure, sounds good. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, welcome everybody. I'm Rick Sterling from Western IM, and for those of you that don't know what this IMCanadaConnect program is about, if you've never been on these sessions before, a while ago during the time of COVID, we decided that there needed to be more education and Canadian content on the internet, and so we formed this program as a bunch of ARMA chapters across Canada, a program called IMCanadaConnect, and we continue to bring programming. Each chapter puts up at least one presentation a year, giving us virtually a year's full of Canadian content on the internet for all of us. So welcome to everybody across Canada today for the IMCanadaConnect presentation, brought to you, supported by Western IM, of course, but today's presentation is brought today by Andrew Geider. I consider Andrew a good friend and a longtime supporter of both our Learn With Us program and the IMCanadaConnect program that we run across Canada with the ARMA chapters. And I'm looking forward to the presentation a lot myself. If you have questions to put in, please put them in the chat session below and we'll monitor that. And after Andrew's presentation, we'll let Andrew answer questions about the presentation after the fact. That's it. Please keep coming to the IMCanadaConnect presentations. They are recorded and they are stored on the westernim.com website. So if you want to share the presentation with some or let people know how to get to the presentation, if you think it's you have other people that might like to see it, please have them go to the westernim.com website, and under community at the top of the first web page, you'll see a thing called community, and then drop down to blog, and that's where the recorded IMCanadaConnect presentations always live. So thank you again. I'm going to disappear now and let Andrew introduce himself. And before I forget, Troy Sawyer, who you see on the right hand side of the screen as well. Troy is one of my partners at Western IM. And Troy actually is a director of development at Western IM, and he kind of keeps the webinars running, sets them up, makes sure all the things behind the scenes are running properly. And Troy will be on with us for the entire presentation, just in case anything happens to be needed, be done. So I will disappear now, and thanks so much for joining today.
Hey, hello everyone. Greetings from wet Burnaby. It's pouring rain here, so what else is new? My name is Andrew Geider. I started here at the City of Burnaby in Privacy and FOI. I have then transitioned into the ECM, Enterprise Content Management program. And my background in both privacy and records management has really made me question, what we do, why do we do it? This presentation came about when my daughter, who goes to Douglas College, got an application from MasterCard to apply for a MasterCard. And she said she did not know when she applied or if she applied, and how did MasterCard get her name and address. So I started doing some digging around and thinking, and that's how this whole presentation came into fruition. Because people will ask, well, universities have almost a carte blanche to do whatever they want to do, but should they? What are the questions we should ask ourselves? What are the questions we should ask our children who go there? And also, what are the questions we should ask the university, or higher education? Because what we have to do is start thinking. We have to start a dialogue. So again, data privacy is not innate. What we need to do is to teach data privacy, to teach ethics, so that people become literate in the digital world, to go beyond Facebook and some of the social media platforms, but to start thinking about how is our data managed. Because quite often we ask ourselves, are the data that the students have, are they being sold to a third party? The universities collect these sources of information, but what do they do with them? Because in a public body like civic government. When we collect, use, and share personal information from the taxpayers, from the citizens, we need a PIA, or Privacy Impact Assessment. And I'm going to talk about that momentarily. But do universities have them? And again, you know, what about obligation? You know, with regards to students' expectations, you know, as one student said, being tracked, whether through websites visited or the idea of my productivity being measured by looking at my screen time is counterproductive, almost anti-academic. So what do we do? Well, we're looking at young people today. You know, they're called digital natives. And now this is from 2018, so I confess it's a little over 5 years old. But they're looking at, you know, students aged 18 to 24 and their use of social media. Again, I'm sure it's gone up for YouTube, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, now called X. I don't know how much of a backlash there is against that. You know, but again, digital natives, 1983 or later. So now it's hard to believe that they're 40 years old. You know, so here we have the whole concept of young people using social media. Do they know the consequences of it? So again, what are the issues around it? So do universities have a PIA, or Privacy Impact Assessment, to determine how long students' data is kept before it is destroyed? Because what happens is then you have the potential for data breaches, right? And again, the institutions claim that they have all this information to help students learn. But my question is, how does having personal information about students help the students learn academically? So I can talk just briefly about privacy impact assessments. I did some research, and it's very interesting. The University of British Columbia is the only university in British Columbia that lists their PIAs on their website. And there are 38 privacy impact assessments that the University of British Columbia has done. There's by name, reference number, date, and you can download the reports. Something a little different, Simon Fraser University, they don't list their PIAs on the website for the public, but what you have to do is be a staff member to log in and to view the PIAs. My question to that is why? And then all the other universities as well, Thompson Rivers, UVic, UNBC, what they do is on their website, they state how to fill in a PIA and why a PIA is necessary, but no completed PIAs that pertain to the university are listed. You know, and I also did some digging around just from a student point of view. How easy or how difficult is it to contact the privacy officer to request PIAs or to request how the university is using personal information? You know, and again, it's very hit and miss. Some of it is, I use the word hidden almost sarcastically. You know, it's not upfront. Universities like to talk about transparency, but you know, if you have to look and search to find how universities are managing your personal information, you know, is that really a good example of transparency? Because again, what are students wary of? Facial recognition, network monitoring, LMS with online learning, which I just talked about, predictive analytics. And as one student said, you know, I constantly get third-party financial aid information that is unwanted, which makes me question if my university is the source for those companies getting my information. You know, I went to Douglas College, you know, and asked point blank, hey, are you selling students information? How did MasterCard get my daughter's name and address for a credit card application if she didn't fill it out? You know, without wanting to accuse Douglas College directly, you know, it really begins to make me think. So what we have, you know, students expect boundaries, you know, again, between their personal and academic lives, but with more and more technology, arguably invasive technology, you know, these lines are becoming more blurred. And again, it's quite right to expect that your personal information will be used for educational purposes only, but where is this laid out? Because students have so much sources of information that agencies can obtain. They can do it through, again, IDs, geolocation, smartphones, social media. And, you know, one begins to question, you know, really, where is the privacy? Am I having my privacy rights eroded in the name of technology or in the pursuit of the next big thing? Because really, are students aware of which information institutions collected? And again, what is the purpose for the collection? You know, it's very easy, like I mentioned previously, to talk about educational needs, but then how is collecting this personal information beneficial for students and their educational needs? COVID made life very interesting in terms of privacy, because now with monitoring, especially monitoring at universities, all this personal information, all this medical information is being collected. You know, you're looking at contact tracing to detect and manage potential outbreaks. Some universities may consider the mandatory use of contact tracing apps. This again raises question of personal information collection and disclosure. Because now you have these apps collecting all your personal information, but what are they doing with it, right? Are they making the individuals aware? So again, even without the use of mobile apps, traditional contact tracing methods will involve the disclosure of medical conditions that, in many cases, can be traced back to specific individuals, even where that individual is not named. You know, so where is this whole concept of privacy? Again, there has to be a clear relationship between the purpose of the collection and the educational purpose, right? Institutions want it. How does that benefit the students? And that is a question that I keep thinking of, especially with COVID, right? You know, there is a whole range of considerations for protecting students' privacy. Looking at how will screening be done? How will the information be collected? What is the frequency, right? Will it be on paper? Will it be electronic? People talk about anonymity and aggregate data. And if that's true, who will it be available to? And what is the purpose of making this personal information, even in an aggregate form, available to non-students, non-academics, right? To health officials, to researchers. And again, it's all very nice to state, you know, or the pursuit of knowledge, you know, but how are we going about doing that? You know, are we beginning to compromise ourselves in this field? And what's happening right now, again, with biometrics, it is really throwing a wrench at things. Again, this is now more prevalent in the States. In 2020, you can see UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, and 50 other schools voted to ban facial recognition. Again, in the States, the whole concept was, well, we have to fight terrorism, we have to fight crime, so we have to use biometrics to gather people's personal information, you know, facial recognition. And is that really true? You know, students have also mobilized to prevent schools and governments from adopting privacy invasive systems that use biometric information. As one student wrote, we have given up so much privacy and liberty for the sake of security. But facial recognition must be where this stops. Facial recognition does not improve security and may actually make it worse. It's also a technology that once mainstreamed can never be taken back. It is fundamentally coercive for educational institutions to require students to participate in biometric surveillance in order to attend class. And so this also ties in now. This has happened at UCLA, but there are parallels to this, in Canada. For example, just earlier in the week at the University of Waterloo, a set of smart vending machines is expected to be removed from campus after students raised privacy concerns about their software. Why? Because the software had a facial recognition application. And so the students said, why do we need vending machines in Canada, in Ontario, in universities that have facial recognition, right? As one student said, I'm kind of shocked just because it's a vending machine, and I really don't think they need to be taking facial recognition. So the University of Waterloo agreed. They said that they were going to remove the smart vending machines. And as another student said, the university has asked that these machines be removed from campus as soon as possible. So, and the students have also said if they don't follow through in a reasonable time, they will file a complaint to the Information and Privacy Commissioner of Ontario. So the whole question then becomes, why are we having facial recognition software in vending machines and in other surveillance cameras on university grounds? I personally cannot justify it. And like I said earlier, starting to talk about, crime, fighting terrorism, looking out for people who are wanted by police can become a little thin. Again, talking about privacy, students have a greater confidence that institutions, including government, will protect their privacy. And I would argue quite rightly so. Here's a 2021 survey, by Generation Lab, and they talked about what the percentage of students believe. But again, now going back to the Pew study of 2018, the disparity of trust in companies compared with the government does not stem from a belief that the government does not collect or collect less personal information from citizens. Rather, what they found, the differences seems to lie in the perception of how the governments and companies will use the information, since governments exist to serve people, whereas companies are obligated to their shareholders. So there seems to be like a social contract, that students trust government because it will look out after them, and corporations look after their investors. But now with universities getting involved, is there that same trust that we now have in governments, or will that trust in higher education and governments start to erode? That's something we'll soon find out. Because tied in with this, is LMS, the learning management system. And what is LMS? Well, we have it here at work at the City of Burnaby. It's a software for the administration, documentation, tracking, reporting, and delivery of educational courses and training programs. Now, that's all very good, but again, how do you justify the information that you collect? Right at work, we wrote a PIA, even though the information collected is by employees. We have our work name, our work phone number, our work email, and we justify how it's kept. It's kept on file to prove that we took a course. Because again, with LMS, there is some concern. Is that once you start tracking library books borrowed and time spent on Blackboard, which is a software program, how beneficial is that? How is the collection and use of personal information going to improve educational experience? So if I just track the books you borrowed or the educational websites that you went to, does that mean that you're doing research? People do research in different ways. And if you're going to give a grade to a student just on using accepted software, accepted library books, etc., is this really the right thing to do? Because again, with learning management systems, again, talking about predictive analytics data to determine future possibilities. This sounds like something either dystopian or from science fiction. But if I just start looking, as an example, at woodworking books, maybe it's because my dad's a carpenter who wants to build a gazebo, and I'm getting those books, doing some research for him, and then giving it to him. So the institution may feel that, well, I should go into a trade, perhaps woodworking, carpentry, or something like that, when really that's not the case at all. So again, student objections, predictive data analysis for recommended course pathways. Do you really want to be told what career path you should pursue? And again, the system is often incomplete or inaccurate. So the last thing we want to do is to discourage students from taking courses, from going into programs that somebody else feels through a flawed analysis that a student should go into. And again, once we start relying on AI, do we start trusting computers over people? I would argue that AI is a tool. It is a means, not an end. And as any tool, it has to be used carefully. Because if not, then we can get into trouble. Because again, with tools, especially computer programs, they are programmed by people, right? And so now you have inherent bias. So again, unconscious bias or implicit bias is defined as prejudice or unsupported judgments in favor or against a person or group as compared to another, right? So again, you're looking at students, and will the instructor give preference or higher grades to someone who has an electronic record of more library books borrowed, of more websites, recommended websites towards education than someone else? And again, here we talk about the potential to be treated differently. Now, granted, we all have our biases, but our challenge is to recognize it so it does not negatively impact on someone else. So again, diversity, stereotyping. You look at everything that's happening, the way we're changing our language, from blind to visually impaired. It really becomes a challenge for us. And I believe that it's not just political correctness that's driving this, but there has to be a real change in the way that we view people, in the way that we view their heritage. So what should we do? Well, first of all, again, according to one of the websites here, it's important to understand their privacy policy. And again, looking at surveys here, I find this almost discouraging, but I was no better when I was in university. How many students have actually found and read the institution's data privacy policy? That's something I challenge all of you to do, perhaps where you are. Look at your alma mater or look at another university. Type in the search field privacy or PIA or freedom of information, and just see how easy it is to find this information, how clearly this information is identified. Is there a policy that is mentioned? Is it easy to access? Or is this policy sitting on the privacy officer's desk waiting for someone to contact, him or her. Because again, you don't know what you don't know. So I'm going to argue that it's our responsibility, but also the university's responsibility to teach privacy, to teach ethics, so students know what to expect. What we should also do is look at considering opt-out options, because quite often it's very easy to click on every single box because you want to get into the program. You want to be perceived as a team player. So what they'll do is, well, they'll say, okay, well, I really don't want to opt into this, getting all these emails and that, but I'm afraid if I say no, then I will be perceived as someone, as an outlier, someone who's not a team player, who's not collective, and then I may not be accepted into the program. So I'll just click everything with a yes and hope for the best. What they don't think of are the consequences of this. And I would argue the universities really don't think it through either. And you can see right here, and this is what my daughter talked about, being annoyed when school shares enrollment information with student loan companies, i.e. credit card companies, who then, well, harassing the French word to use, but, then to take out their loans to use their credit cards. They say, well, you're in university, you should establish your credit rating, etc., which arguably is true, but how did they get that information? That's really becomes the whole issue moving forward. How anonymous can we be? How much of our privacy do we have to give up to get what we want? And again, the EDUCAUSE review, talking about what is acceptable, what is unacceptable with regards to the release of information. Because some universities, they track websites that students visit while on campus Wi-Fi. Like some universities will encourage students, well, don't use your own Wi-Fi, save money, save data, etc. Use the university's Wi-Fi. But then what happens when you do that is, the university then starts collecting information on the websites that you visit. And is that any of their information? If I visit the ACLU website or the FOI Privacy Commissioner's website, will the university then be concerned that I'm visiting websites that they feel may intrude on their privacy? Again, here's the whole thing. Are there aspects of your identity or life that you feel would put you in a place of special vulnerability if certain data were known about you or used against you? Right? So if you were from the LGBTQ community, what's happening right now in the States, have you had an abortion or anything like that? This is all personal information. It's very private. But once it comes out, can it be used against you? And I would argue it can, which is why it's so important to maintain the privacy guardrails that we have set up, not just for government, but for other academic institutions as well. What students have to see, is again right here. Students are concerned about big technology and apps on smartphones. What happened with Tim Hortons and their apps tracking you everywhere you go. Now, do universities have the same thing? Again, because the whole issue of profiling, again, accurate or not, and making assumptions about the politics, religion, etc. Will that compromise me with regards to scholarships, grants, and things like that? We'd like to think that we will be based on merit, but again, looking at what's happening, especially in the States, politics, religion, etc., become intertwined, and there is a concern that it can be used against the student because they don't fit into the state's stream of education. Looking at what's happening in states and to a degree in Canada too, with banning books. So if it ever came out that I went to the library, I took out a book quite often, Shakespeare, the Merchant of Venice, has been banned, is deemed anti-Semitic. So, and then it comes out that I read an anti-Semitic book, therefore I am an anti-Semitic person, therefore I am a bad person. All of these jumps, can really impact a person negatively moving forward, how unintentional it may be. Again, so we're getting a lot of quotes here from students. Again, because do you really want your name on here? You want to protect yourself. So I've come up with some recommendations. I've talked about the concerns. Now, what can we do moving forward to protect ourselves? Right? Again, it's also the institutions, but it's also us. What we have to do is teach. We have to think critically. We have to think about privacy. We really can't take it for granted. I watched that series on Netflix, Handmaid's Tale. And, you can see how over time, this doesn't happen overnight, but our rights slowly become eroded until we lose it. And then we realize we don't have it anymore and we can't get it back. So again, preparing students, to comprehend the implications of the collection, use, and sharing of personal information without prior knowledge and consent, right? Looking again back at the smart vending machines that were at the University of Waterloo. Is this really the right thing to do? And to develop curricula on privacy and ethics. And it has to keep pace with technological developments because technology is moving faster than legislation. It's moving faster than us older people, use that term, can comprehend not just what it's doing now, but the implications of what's going to happen moving forward. So again, universities, they have to follow some very basic privacy principles. Share with us how and why you collect this personal information. There has to be a reason, right? And how long do you hold on to it for? Because I would argue that, you can collect this personal information. When I went to university, you've got my student number, you got my social insurance number, you have my address, my phone number. But what happens quite often if I move after 10 years, then some of that information becomes obsolete, right? What do you do with that? How long do you hold on to that? I contacted Simon Fraser University, where I went for my undergrad, and UBC, where I went for my graduate studies. And I said, hey, how long do you keep my personal information for? And they never got back to me. So, you have to be very careful. And I don't want to sound too cynical, but how are we managing our private lives, especially with regards to, because again, universities have to build trust, right? And a lot of us, you could argue that universities have a monopoly on education. Because if I want to become a doctor or an engineer or get my MBA, I have to go to the university. And yes, there are a range of universities, but I'm sure that they're quite similar in terms of their privacy. So how do I not compromise my personal life to go to a university? Increasing awareness by students and also academics, professors, on the whole purpose of this right here. And again, it's very easy to talk about full transparency, but tell me, where's your privacy policy? Show me your PIAs. UBC is the only university that has really done that, and they give them full points for that. So again, to understand student needs, right? Again, now this is where researchers have to do something as well. So again, what are privacy concerns and beliefs? Because I would argue that when I went to university back in the 1980s, my concept of privacy was pretty well non-existent. So moving forward, as I began to educate myself, what are some of the background information, and how it affects ethnicity, socioeconomic status, special needs. And again, now AI is, I don't want to call it the next big thing, because it has been here for a little while. We really just didn't recognize it. But what happens when we rely on algorithms, right? Which again has been criticized for racial and gender bias. And again, the whole thing is unintentionally excludes students of color, other marginalized student groups, but still then they become excluded. You could say, well, we did things in the best of intentions, which I would argue is true, but then if it impacts somebody negatively or a group negatively, are those really the best of intentions? Are they the best of intentions for us, or are they the best of intentions for all students as a whole? So again, we have to start developing privacy policies, procedures, looking at communication, right? What are the good privacy policies, good privacy practices? First of all, the policies are written in English, right? They're not written by lawyers. They're easy to access, they're easy to understand, and you have a contact, usually an email of someone of the privacy officer within that academic institution. And again, that person, the privacy officer, has to get back to the student. Because when you have communication, you have transparency. And that's where students begin to believe in you. Again, we have to justify the collection, right? And how does it improve students' education? There has to be, again, clear options on opting out, that there are no implications or consequences of opting out of receiving emails or certain software programs, because people want their privacy. They shouldn't be forced to opt in and to stay opt in. You can opt in if you change your mind. You should be able to opt out. So really, this is the crux of what I've talked about, for 45 minutes. Now, universities, yes, they collect their people's personal information, but then what I challenge them is just, you tell me how you're going to use it. How does it benefit the students academically? How long do you keep it for? What do you do with it? And be upfront with me, do you sell it? And really, that concludes my presentation. And I've got, if anybody wants this deck, I've got all the footnotes back here of the credits. So I'm going to open it up right now for questions from anybody. And I'd be also interested in hearing about your experiences as well, perhaps your children's experiences, when they go to higher education. I really don't like that term because it almost sounds pretentious, to colleges, to universities, their experiences with privacy and things like that. Turn it over to Troy now.
Yeah, no, that's good. There's a couple of questions kind of coming through on chat, and I'll obviously PIAs are coming up here, but I want to jump ahead to a question and then come back to some of the PIA stuff. So the first question here that I will ask is, what is your take on the student management systems, the administration, registration, recruitment? Now, obviously, we're talking specifically about higher education here, but in general, there are going to be kind of systems every organizations, because we're going to have a lot of people in here that are in different disciplines. Yeah. So just in general, how management systems in general kind of, and what your take on them and necessity within an organization and how it applies to privacy.
Again, if you can justify the information that you collect, state how it's going to be used, state how long you will keep it for, then I don't have a problem with that. Here at the City of Burnaby, I assist in writing PIAs, and PIAs have to be approved, sorry. And as long as you can be upfront and state the purpose of the collection, how long you're going to keep it for, and again, looking at software and trying to remove hidden bias and things like that, We cannot turn our back on technology, but what we have to do is manage it. So really, I don't have a problem with it as long as there are parameters around it.
And that kind of comes back to the PIA. When you implement systems like that,
Yeah.
we have those kind of processes in place for impact assessments and things like that. So actually, just as a quick note here, somebody has looked at a couple of post-secondary institutions they've interacted with. 3 of them had broad, vague statements on their website. The only one not was in BC, actually a link to a policy. So people are kind of looking up and seeing kind of what's available.
Mhm.
Okay, so going back to the PIAs and kind of the policies and questions around those. So the first one here is, do you see a need for either public bodies or commissioners to publish all PIs transparently? Obviously here, one of the other comments is that public bodies under FOPA, they're required to publish directories of personal information banks that inform individuals what personal information is collected and disclosed. So it looks like in also PSIs in BC have a data privacy access to information policy published on their website, and many have standalone privacy statements. So just kind of an overall, when it comes to PIAs, do you feel that public bodies should be publishing those, like you'd mentioned earlier in your presentation?
Yes, this is my own opinion. I believe in open government. I also believe in open university. The fact that UBC has been proactive in publicly releasing their PIAs for everybody to read and for the contact information, it makes people aware of what apps are being used, what software is being used, why they are used, and how the personal information is being collected. It's very similar in one sense. Some municipalities post their FOI requests, again, in the name of transparency, and they can provide summaries and things like that, and if it's released, it's severed. So again, what we're talking about is people knowing what is going on at these organizations. I would encourage all universities to post their PIAs and to be more forthright in how they collect and use personal information, and making it very obvious who to contact and how to.
Actually, kind of as a follow-up there, you'd mentioned that you have contacted a couple and haven't got responses. One of the things I've run into, obviously, the number of projects I've done around this, has been that the people that are asked those questions, so when you submitted that question to those universities, those who are receiving the questions often don't have the knowledge of privacy to answer that question. So the organizations might implement the privacy policies, but when you email to ask, hey, how long are you keeping my information? Generally, those people aren't the ones that can answer it. Have you kind of run into that? Is that your feeling for why you weren't getting answers?
Or they're just trying to avoid me to avoid embarrassment.
Yeah.
I mean, be clean. Hey, Andrew, we keep your personal information for 5 years after graduation, so you can be on our alumni or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm cool with that. But at least you've stated how long you're going to keep it for, and you tell me why you're keeping it. Okay. Like I mentioned too, people move, and it's traditional. Again, let's say for a woman who goes to university and later marries, to change her name. So again, and people move around, right? So the address changes, the phone number changes. So it's very easy to have obsolete data of that person. Now, how beneficial is that for the university?
Yeah, and that's even going back to the PIAs thing. As part of your impact assessment, that should be one of the questions you're asking is, just because we're keeping it, is it still valid? And dictate things like retention around those kinds of questions. Yeah.
I wanted to say that, Andrew, we actually have some experience working around the kind of 800-pound gorilla of higher education applications, which is Banner. and we've actually done integration and things like that with the banner app, and it is not for the faint of heart. Like, this is a very, very complex student record keeping system that thousands of universities actually use all over the world, and it is it's not a light duty application by any means.
No, and we even implemented a custom solution for COVID tracking for college during COVID as well. That we ran into all kinds of things with anonymizing data. I think that was going to be my next direction, is what are some of the things people can do to help keep data they are keeping private. So as part of that process, we had admins that were reviewing COVID submission documents, records, but those people didn't need to know the address of the person they were reviewing. So how could you keep, silos of data appropriate, even with data that you are keeping for legitimate reasons?
I find quite often too, like, universities don't have, I mean, they say they do, but they have a records management program for faculty records, but student information, I found, is not included in that.
Yeah.
So again, retention just goes out the window.
I'm actually appalled, like I never thought, of course, I was in university long before you were as well, Andrew. So there was no worries about that in those days, because they were still using a walrus tusk and a block of ice for student information. But really, I am appalled, because I had no idea that a higher education institution would actually even think about selling student information. I thought they would be sacrosanct, and they would be protecting it with their lives, actually, from outside sources. I can't even tell you how appalled I am that is actually taking place. So how naive am I?
Well, I mean, if you want to be an optimist, you could say what happened to my daughter was a data breach, which we didn't want to pursue it, right? Again, because we didn't want to jeopardize her going into and staying at Douglas College. I mean, at worst, I would almost call it predatory if the institutions are selling, personal information of students to a third party for whatever reason.
Yeah,
Because
and
students are not
guaranteed
made
they're
aware
not
of it.
guaranteed they're not giving it away.
Yeah, and they're not giving any of that money to the students either.
Right, for sure. Yeah, wow. I so appreciate your presentation, because now I'm going to think about this in a whole different way than I ever have before. I mean, I always thought about the complexities. Like, I understand the complexities of student information systems. Like, they are very complex pieces of software. They really are, and very difficult to work with and around. Man, I just had never thought that anybody would ever try to give information away. Wow.
Actually, just to clarify a point here, we've got another question. Just to clarify, so the bodies that are required to publish those data banks and stuff, does that include metadata collected or other hidden data considered? So obviously data is data, and if it's structured data in a database or submission documents, we still feel that falls under this data privacy being required to be published.
Yeah, again, this is my opinion, whether it's structured data, unstructured data, to me, that's irrelevant. What is relevant is it personal? Is it identifiable? Because when we it's like going to a doctor. When we give the doctor our medical information, there is a bond of trust that our privacy will not be violated, that the doctor will not sell. Let's just say I have diabetes, okay? Then the doctor will not sell my medical information to a company that manufactures diabetic medicine or insulin or anything like that, and then goes after me to say, hey, Andrews, since you have diabetes, we'll use this insulin. We'll give you a discount. Don't use that. I mean,
I think that's a very good example to take back to your daughter getting the credit card thing. How is that any different, right? Like, that's the same type of a privacy breach, no matter if it's a medical condition or you're attending colleges and I think that was a great example.
Yeah, for sure. Holy smokes.
Well, again, that kind of comes back to the importance of asking the questions and having presentations like this to begin with, right? If we're not aware of even just ask the question, how will we?
And I would encourage to get parents to ask questions to the universities, get their sons, daughters to ask questions to the universities, and just see what happens.
Mhm.
Well, that's kind of all the questions. Rick, do
Okay.
you have anything else, or?
I don't, other than this is a topic that I've never thought about before, Andrew. So I gotta thank you so much for bringing this to our attention and presenting on the topic, because I really had no idea this would actually be occurring, and I was very naive.
Well, I guess we all are, you know.
I
So
so
thank you for
appreciate that.
inviting me. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, you usually bring those kind of topics to these presentations, though, Andrew. The stuff that I hadn't thought about very much before. Make my head hurt a little bit.
Yeah.
So I want to thank everybody, Andrew specifically for putting this presentation together, and Troy for looking after everything for us for the webinar and everything like that, and all of you for attending the IMCanadaConnect session today. If you want to sign up, there's a sign up place on the westernim.com website. As always, you'll get information on the sessions that are occurring in IMCanadaConnect from your chapter, local chapter. The next session will be Southwestern Ontario at the end of March. I think it's the 27th of March, and you will see marketing material on that as soon as we get it from the Southwestern Ontario chapter. The next month, April, is RIM month, actually. For those of you that don't know, ARMA does RIM month in April, which is, we try to do as many presentations as we can. We do one a week if we can get that many for the RIM month. The first one, though, the April 3rd presentation will be Donna O'Toole from Newfoundland, and Donna will be doing a presentation on things to do during RIM month. So if you want to do something for RIM month, I think that'll be a really well-attended session, actually, and people will have a lot of useful information to come up with in the chat as well about things they may have done in the past for RIM month. So that'll be, please make sure you attend that one as well. You'll get marketing material again as soon as we get it. There's another presentation booked for the end of RIM month, and that would be Toronto is putting that one on. I'm looking forward to that one as well. So just stay tuned. There's lots of good presentations up to the end of June now coming for IMCanadaConnect, and of course our Western IM program that we've done for years on that Learn with Us as well. There's recorded presentations of both Learn with Us and IMCanadaConnect on our website. So thank you again for attending. Andrew, look forward to seeing you when I see you in person next time. And thanks so much, everybody, for supporting ARMA across the country by attending the IMCanadaConnect presentations. Everybody have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you at the next session.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye now.